You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Are you poco loco for Coco this Halloween? Man, I sure hope so. Guys, welcome back to the SG Drive-In, our Halloween edition. And this time it is a little bit of a bait and switch. I'm gonna tell you guys, this movie isn't actually about Halloween. It's about Dia de Muerta, and we're gonna discuss how that holiday is related to Halloween and Reformation Day and All Saints Day and All Souls Day and all the holidays that have been all right there at the end of October, beginning of November. We're really excited for it, guys. I'm one of your hosts today, Joshua Knoll. I am the co-host of the Whole Church podcast. I am joined today by the other co-host of the Whole Church podcast, the greatest co-host of all time, TJ Tiberius One Blackwell. And we are also joined by your favorite Lutheran pastor, Pastor Will Rose of Holy Trinity Chapel Hill. He is the Chill, Will, Thrill, Wilbo Baggins. He has more nicknames than you could imagine someone with a name like Will should have.
And interesting fact, at the church, at my church, I actually hung out with Joshua in person under the same roof, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And we talked about that on my other show, the Whole Church podcast, recently. In fact, this Wednesday. So go back and listen to that. But today we're here to talk about Coco, a Disney Pixar movie that has to do with Dia de Muerta. Okay, guys, so we just went to the drive-in. Just imagine with me, right? And we watched this movie. We see Coco. And I put the car in drive. I pull away. What's the first thing you guys say leaving the theater?
Remember me.
Yeah, TJ just starts singing. Maybe he'll do a rendition for us later on.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, not. I think for me, it hits me a different way because my grandmother had dementia in the last years of her life. My mom is wrestling with dementia now. And so this whole idea of forgetting, remembering, not remembering kind of hits kind of a tender spot in my life. And so I'm reflecting on what can I do to help the legacy of those who can't remember, or what can we do to remember? So yeah, it's a colorful movie. It's a bright movie. It goes all over the place.
Gorgeous.
It's just a gorgeous movie. So I'm like, man, some animators did a fine job on that one. Is one thought, but also like it hits hard of like how to remember our loved ones and how can we help them remember.
Oh yeah. So we're leaving. TJ starts singing. Will does a really hard emotional note, and me, the driver, is slowly putting his phone away like he wasn't about to just play the soundtrack starting with poco loco.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, it just got emotional. Let me put this up.
Yeah.
Oh man, but also poco loco, fantastic song. That's the first thing I want to talk about. Why is that song not longer, and why don't we listen to it every day?
I do.
It's so good.
I listen to it all the time.
It's so good. When we went to Epcot, which is funny because Tiffany hasn't seen the movie, but me, my wife, and TJ all went to Epcot together, and we were in the Mexico section, and TJ and I just sung poco loco. That's just awesome. What we did. That's all we needed to do. That's why we were there. Yeah.
But I would probably talk about like how good the voice acting was. Like, probably the best child voice performance I've ever heard.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, the songs were amazing. The colors were amazing. The story was amazing. The acting was amazing. Like, it was just all around. I can't think of a fault in this movie. I love this movie.
Yeah, I would probably think like, oh, wow, that's like my new favorite Pixar movie. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to beat that one. The thing is, there's so many good Pixar movies. I will always love Monster Inc. because it's a classic. It's great. But Coco's, man, it's on up there. And what's funny is the first time I saw it, I thought I just didn't like this movie. I thought that was pretty boring. And I think it's because there's two reasons for this. Right. First is because I
went with the bad opinions.
Yeah. First is I have three opinions. One's I have bad opinions. The second reason was I went in thinking it was a Disney animated film. So I was thinking it was going to be a sing-along because, so you see all the thing with the guitars, it's going to be like that. It's going to be constant singing. It's not that. Don't go in expecting that. It is a Pixar film that features music and is about music, which means it won't be a musical in the same way.
Right.
So that was one thing, because I had bad expectations. The other thing is I just think the second time I watched it, I wasn't as closed off. I was more open to feeling what the movie was trying to portray. So I was able to kind of connect on that emotional level better. And this is a very emotional movie.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Like what came out in 2017, so my kids were 5 years younger, so we were still in that time frame of like each Disney movie that came out to the theater, we'd all go as a family and watch it and see what's going on. But and it leans into a different culture. Disney's like, hey, we need to open up to different cultures and lean into that. I don't know if there's any backlash to them getting the culture wrong or not, or right. I can't remember. Sometimes that happens with Disney, but it seems like this one, they're like, yep, they nailed this one.
Yeah, everybody was just happy with this. Yeah.
Yep.
So TJ, could you break down real quick, what is this movie about? What's the general plot? Just so people know what we're talking about if they haven't seen it. So they should just go see it.
The movie is about our main character, Miguel, who is born into a family of shoemakers, but his passion is in music. He wants to be a musician. Music is banned in the house, in the family. And he finds out, well, he doesn't find out. He does find out eventually. Spoiler alert, by the way. If you're listening to this, you should have known that already.
Right.
Eventually, he finds out that his great-grandpa was a musician who wrote some of the most famous songs in the world, which I don't know if you missed that, but that's what happens. Yeah. Hector wrote all of the songs that Ernesto de la Cruz sings. And it's about his journey to become that. And he gets a little bit sidetracked in the world of the dead, where he tries to meet Ernesto de la Cruz, his hero, his role model, while, coming into his own voice, singing, playing the guitar, thinks he's not allowed to do at home, and then finds out that guy's evil and killed his real great-grandfather, who is Coco's father. Is it great or great-great?
I don't know.
I think it's great. I'm pretty sure it's great. But his great-grandfather was killed by Ernesto de la Cruz. Ernesto de la Cruz stole all of his songs, and that's like our climax of the movie is finding that out. And once he's in the land of the dead, his main goal is to get Hector's photo back on an ofrenda. He didn't know Hector was his great-grandpa at the time, and finding that out, that Miguel's dead family, the ones chasing him around the Day of the Dead, to give him his blessing, give him their blessing. But no music is the same people who are avoiding Hector and who took him off the ofrenda. That's pretty much it. It might have been a bit of a discombobulated summary.
Yeah, there's also this plot where Hector is trying to avoid the final death.
Yes.
Because when you are forgotten, you die in the land of the dead and you're just dead. And because his picture's not up, people are likely to forget him. And there's only one person left who remembers who he is. So there's this sense of urgency throughout the film for him as well. And that really kind of drove the plot for me, where I was like, okay, this is what makes it interesting. There's huge stakes in this film. Pastor Will, how does this movie compare to your other favorite Halloween films? Because this is pretty different from our other picks so far.
Yeah, I think, it's not a slasher movie. It's not like blood and gore. It's not jump scares or zombies, but the real horror or the urgency is that, like, what if you fade away and no one remembers you? You're only a couple generations from people, and that can be scary. And I think, like it really put on me this kind of sense of urgency to do a little bit more digging and learn about my family tree, my granddad, my great granddad, who came over from overseas. What's their family like? And thinking about my own life, there might be a little different because I just somewhat in the public eye as a pastor who've been a part of different communities of faith. But in terms of my own family, I'm only a couple generations and no one's going to remember who I am. And for me, that's kind of sad. That's kind of scary. So how can you keep your legacy in a healthy way and for your folks? So I think it falls in. Day of the Dead is not the zombie movie Day of the Dead. It's a different one. It's what is death? What is your mortality? What does horror do? But like help you face your own mortality and then help push you to reflect on what you truly value in scary situations. And I think this does. What do we value most? And then there's that subplot, like you said, like plagiarism and taking advantage of other people and how they could be forgotten and their story forgotten by being exploited or taken advantage of, that no one would ever know that story, how sad that is. So I think it fits. I think it definitely fits.
Yeah. The theme and everything else might stand out, I mean, not the theme, the colors, the vibe, all of that. The fact that it's a cartoon might stand out compared to our other drive-in films, but how it handles death is very similar to these other, even classic horror films.
Exactly.
It's really an existential horror movie.
Mm.
Also, I would forgive somebody if they called it a creature flick.
Explain.
Yeah.
No.
Expand.
I forget what they're called.
Oh, the
Alebrijes. The Alebrijes? Not the dog. He's not scary. But grandma's Alebrije? Why does she have a chimera? That's terrifying.
Yeah.
True.
It's like the only one we see in the movie that is straight up a monster.
True.
Everyone else's is just an animal.
All right. So, Pastor Will, 0 to 10. How you rating this thing?
9.34.
Valid.
Yeah. I'm gonna be contrarian here. I don't want to give it a 10 out of 10 only because when I compare it to my favorites, I'm like, I don't like it that much, but I seriously can't find a flaw in it. And I can't imagine myself finding times that I just don't want to watch it. I'm giving it a 9.9 just because I don't want to give it a 10. That's it.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing.
9.9.
Yeah,
you guys have.
Like
we don't have to talk about it now. You don't have to talk about it now, but there are movies out there you give a 10. Is there
Probably
a perfect
not.
film?
Yeah, Captain America and the Winter Soldier.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Gotcha.
I think perfection is unattainable.
Oh, yeah? Have you seen Star Wars A New Hope?
Mm-hmm.
What about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? Because those are the 3 that I'd give a 10. That's it.
Yep.
Wow. And
All
Coco's just slightly underneath with a 9.9.
It's so good. It is just so good. Guys, man. All right. Well, man. TJ, what do you know about the Day of the Dead? Outside of this movie, what do you know about Dia de Muertos?
So Dia de los Muertos, I think my first exposure to it was from the Scooby-Doo movie, Curse of the Chupacabra.
Perfect. We just did a Chupacabra horror house earlier this year at a...
it was a lot less scary than the Scooby-Doo movie.
Yeah, that's true.
But basically, it is about, like, the whole holiday is about my favorite way of dealing with, the loss of a loved one, which is celebrating the good memories and having a good time in their honor. That's what I'm all about. That's the New Orleans experience.
Yeah.
At least that's what I thought of it as until then.
They have some weird traditions too, where like one day is when like the adults come, but then there's a separate day where the children are out. So it's like it's really more than just a day. But I don't completely understand how that works.
In some parts of Mexico, it can last up until like the 6th of November.
Yeah,
but it's regional.
Yeah, just like a season of remembering your dead. And,
yeah, it's a cool holiday.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with some of the original Celtic ideas that become our Halloween today, and that were kind of transfused with All Saints Day as well, because the belief with Dia de Muertos is a lot to do with it being a day that we are especially close to the spiritual world, where the spiritual world and our world can interact a little bit more than usual. And that gets back in Celtic tradition. So you have like old Ireland. They basically just believe that a lot of their pagan religiosity kind of stuff revolved around the seasons. And fall, when, the end of the crops, things are starting to, die out, all that. They thought that is when, that time, you were closest to the spirit world. And eventually it evolved to a specific day, that this is the last harvest day. That's when the spirits visit us. The day before is when the demons are walking around. So we got to dress up sort of like demons so they don't come and get us, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of traditions that kind of all accumulate together. There's one story of an Irish man who tricked death out of getting him a couple times until he eventually got stuck in a lantern. And that's why they have jack-o'-lanterns. It's a weird story. Look it up.
Yeah. His name was Jack.
Yeah. But there were a lot of traditions like that. And when the church came along, like the church likes to do, they wanted to take that holiday for themselves, and they tried to move it into like the springtime for a while for some reason. And people just kept celebrating it during their original time because they're like, we don't really care what you said, church. So eventually the church took the day and was like, well, yeah, it's when we're closest to the spirit world, thus All Saints Day. We'll think about the saints. And that's just how they did that. Then we have All Souls Day. And when the church's traditions make it over to some of these more Hispanic countries, I think that's what inspired a lot of the tradition and stuff with Dia de los Muertos. I didn't say that right, did I?
You were close.
Okay. But that's where we get that connection at. So that being said, Pastor Will, you're here as our bona fide Lutheran, and I gotta ask, as far as we're thinking of all these holidays at the end of October, beginning of November, where does Reformation Day, All Saints Day, All Souls Day, where do those religious calendar holidays fit into this conversation?
Yeah, so kind of the history of the Reformation and Martin Luther is that you can go back and read about Martin Luther and all he did in terms of the Reformation. But the legend goes that on October 31st, 1517, Martin Luther wrote out 95 tweets and put them up on Twitter. And it really became controversial, and he got canceled by the Roman Catholic Church. No, that's not what happened. That's what happened. See, on All Saints Day, November 1st, Luther had a problem with some of the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church of that day. He saw some inconsistencies with traditions and what certain people were preaching and how and with the Bible and the Scripture and this word of grace that you don't have to earn your own salvation. So he knew people were going to come to church on a big festival holiday on November 1st, All Saints Day. He knew people were going to come. It's going to be a very crowded, busy day at the church. So kind of the bulletin board of the day, the front door of the church, he nailed 95 theses, his 95 theses, these 95 statements of how he disagreed with the inconsistency of the church tradition of indulgences with the word of Scripture. And he posted this, nailed them to the church door so that when people came to church, they would see what he had written to cause really a call for debate. It wasn't like, hey, I'm leaving the church, I'm out of here, you guys suck. It wasn't anything like that. It was more like, these are 95 points. I would love to sit down and have a debate whether this is true or not. Let's talk about these things. So since he knew everyone was going to be in church on November 1st, he did it on October 31st, which is Reformation Day. Well, we know the tradition of Halloween, All Hallows Eve, the All Saints Day Eve. People did different parties and things and believed certain superstitions and traditions the night before a holy day. Perhaps the demons came out, the monsters came out, so you would do things to disguise yourself or put jack-o'-lanterns on the front door to ward off evil spirits because they knew they were out and about the day before All Saints Day. But that's not tied to the Lutheran tradition as much as Martin Luther just kind of posted his 95 Theses on October 31st.
So would you say that he chose trick instead of treat for the Catholic Church?
Yeah, I think he was like, he would think probably his words were a treat for everyone to hear, but it ended up tricking and a big shift in church history from that day moving forward.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's interesting because I feel like you hear a lot of Christians, or especially, your college Christians, I would say. I think you know what I mean when I talk about that group. When someone says Happy Halloween, they like to do the Happy Reformation Day. Like, okay, guys, like Happy Halloween. Like, yes, it can be both, but you don't need to respond to Happy Halloween with Happy Reformation.
All Hallows Eve. It's still All Hallows Eve, the day before All Saints Day. So there's not a wrong statement. Halloween is not a wrong statement. But, there's a Reformation Martin Luther tradition there.
And it's also just interesting because we do have the sense that something is special about this time of year. We kept that. We kept a lot of the Celtic stuff that I mentioned earlier, and we kept a lot of the stuff from Dia de Muerte. Some of those traditions seeped into American Halloween. So we have this weird mosh podge of, yes, there is some religious activity going on with the high church people. There is something special about the night, something magical, a lot of people would say. We have some of these Celtic traditions and dressing up, jack-o'-lanterns, all of that stuff. And we have these other traditions of thinking about the dead, especially in our movies and all that. There's a large theme of death, and a lot of that comes from this Dia de Muerte stuff, all stuck together, which makes it one of the most truly American holidays when you think about it.
Yeah.
So how important is it, when we're talking about All Saints Day, how important is it that we remember the saints that have gone before us? I mean, we don't want to worship saints or worship C.S. Lewis. This is the year of Lewis, right? But we want to remember them. Where do we draw the line? Like, what is okay to do when it comes to that?
Yeah, I think we always, there's role models and mentors that guide us through life, whether they're teachers, family members, friends, people we look up to that help guide us, our lampposts and pillars that help lead along the way and guide us in our journey. And so the church has always lifted up the saints, those heroes of faith who are examples of faith. Does that mean they're always perfect, that they always did everything perfectly, but we look up to them as role models for our faith. And so, and they encourage us and lead us. And so, All Saints Day, November 1st, is really a day because the church has only 365 days to have specific days for specific saints. December 6th is for St. Nicholas, my favorite saint, old Santa himself, St. Nicholas. My middle name's Nicholas. His day is December 6th. So, you're going to just run out of days. But there are some people who don't get their own specific day, or there may be some saints who aren't canonized by the church, or you remember, who say there are people who aren't recognized that did heroic acts of faith that we just don't know their story. So we're just going to acknowledge them and remember them on All Saints. And then in my church, we usually, light candles or say prayers or ring a bell for our loved ones who've died over the last year. So it's not necessarily, yes, we remember St. Augustine and St. Nicholas and all the saints who we could ever possibly think of, but also those close to us, like my grandma Berling or others who've been role models for us or even died over the last year. We'll lift their name up and ring a bell to remember them on All Saints Day.
Yeah. And that also gets to the day after All Saints Day. That gets talked about a lot less. All Souls Day. I like that a lot. Because there are people who we might not consider saints that are still worth the remembering, which is what a lot of this movie is about. Which is part of why we love this movie so much. For me, is it has true, I don't know if you would call it religious, but to me, there's a level of spirituality in the theme that this movie hits at that I'm like, I need that. Like, I need to remember that. Especially this year, I lost one of my grandfathers and I lost my last grandfather and one of my grandmothers. And I'm like, yeah, I needed this movie at this point in my life. And yeah, it's just a silly cartoon, but sometimes it's more than that. Yeah. TJ says no.
I don't think anybody would call Coco just a silly cartoon.
They shouldn't. Yeah. TJ, what do you think? How important is it to remember the dead?
I would say very. It depends on your current mental state for some people.
Yeah.
But generally, it's important to remember your past loved ones.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the heroes too. There's the standing on the shoulder of giants. Is there? So for me, it is C.S. Lewis. Ironically, is that I'm like, I remember his life. I stand on his legacy, and I try to build on that the best that I can. Is there anyone for you, TJ, that you're like, this is the dead guy for me?
The one dead guy for me.
Yeah, the dead
Jesus
guy.
Christ, amen.
He's not dead. He is alive.
Yeah, technicality. There you go.
He's living on the inside.
But yeah, have you ever? All right, that's enough podcast for me. Hey, copyright stricken.
Okay, but other
you ever
than
heard
Jesus,
of
Steve-O, yes, but I can't remember who it is.
Oh, well, that'd be very funny if you did.
Oh,
but. Not that I can think of. I'm not building off of a legacy. I'm starting one.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Except my roommate Eli, he's like 6'4". I stand on his shoulders sometimes.
All right. Well, Pastor Will, is there a dead guy that's not Jesus that you're like, this is the one that I look to his legacy and try to, I don't know, imitate or build off of?
Yeah, I think Martin Luther King Jr. Is one that I look up to in terms of what he fought for race and racism and desegregation and those things. I think in college I read some of his sermons and I was pretty convicted by those sermons. And the white church, the lukewarm white church that was trying to say, well, maybe slow down, maybe you needed to take your time with this. He's like, no, there's a sense of urgency here that we need to step up. And so for me, Martin Luther King Jr., as a Lutheran, you might think that I'd say Martin Luther, but as a Lutheran minister, but he sparked the Reformation, but Martin Luther King Jr. I'll say that one for now.
Solid choice. Yeah. So what are some practical ways that we can remember, Martin Luther King Jr., C.S. Lewis, TJ, what are some ways that we could just remember those who've gone before us year round, like not just for Halloween or not just for All Saints Day? What is something that we can do that would better help us kind of keep this at the forefront a little bit? You know what I mean? I'll start. Maybe it'll help if I start. For me, with remembering C.S. Lewis, I honor his work in his books by whenever I see that he's quoted Don Quixote or something, I take the time to read these other works that he built his off of and to appreciate the things he appreciated and see if maybe I can see some of what he saw in these works. And it doesn't matter what time of the year it is. When I read C.S. Lewis and I come across that, that's just something that I do. Is there anything for you, Pastor Will, that you're like, this is, maybe it's even a loved one personally, that you're like, this is just something I do to remember them?
Yeah, I think when I go back to Martin Luther King Jr., like I think he has a day, he has an American holiday where we take the day off and hopefully do a day of service, and I hate to relegate like just healthy race relations just one day in January. But so hopefully you're working towards that each and every day when you go out and about in society. So that's what especially after the summer of George Floyd and all that, like we've made a considered effort to not just read a book and think we're going to fix racism, but really do the hard work in it and really reflect on that. So, and I do think, I think just getting in touch with your own family or family tree and understand where you're coming from and where you're going is pretty important to understand who you are and not repeating mistakes of your family, but also drawing out the gifts and trying to help the next generation do that. And I don't know, are we going to talk about like, is it okay for now me to talk about Jesus and him talking about do this in remembrance of me, or is that another spot?
You can go ahead, but
yeah, I think also like a big part of our faith in the Christian tradition is like this meal that Jesus shared with his disciples, and he was sharing the Passover meal, but a part of that meal he attaches that to his own identity and says, "Do this in remembrance of me." So we remember Jesus every day, but there's a physical act there of sharing bread and wine and reflecting on his body and blood, the sacramental nature of his presence with us. That we call the Eucharist, which is a Greek word that means thanksgiving. But within that is the command is do this in remembrance of me. Remember me. And that's a big part of what this movie is, remembering our loved ones, remembering those who've gone before us. And that's a big part of extending the ministry of who Jesus is in the world, remembering him.
And we will now close out with TJ's rendition of Remember Me.
No.
All right. Well, TJ, is there anything that you do for loved ones or Jesus that you try to remember year round?
I talk about my family. My heritage is pretty important to me.
Yeah. I'm really surprised you didn't say Sir Francis Drake.
Yeah.
When I first asked you about dead people.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to look. Well, if I'm not I don't work for the government.
Yeah.
So.
Are you sure? I don't know if I try. Maybe you could be.
They might work on me.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't work for them.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
But it for half of my family, it's pretty easy to remember them because they're in pop culture references and they're easy to track, and we can go all the way back because it's.
So I don't know this story. Sir Francis Drake is like your great grandfather.
Yeah.
Oh man, did not know this story.
I thought he was your dad.
Yeah, he's my dad. I'm his direct son. I just turned 430.
I've been telling people, I don't know why they picked these movies for your birth year. Movies weren't around when you were born.
No, I was there for the first one.
Yeah.
But
cool.
And then the other side is just important to my heritage, my ethnicity. I am white, but that means a lot of things. Part of that is Lithuanian, and I'm I'm a big fan of the culture. Especially like I got the flag.
Oh yeah.
But if you've never seen it before, there is a hill of crosses in Lithuania that Eastern European Christians will take a pilgrimage to leave their own cross, and there are just thousands and thousands of crosses on this hill.
Really cool.
It's gorgeous. I want to go one day.
That's a really cool way to honor your dead.
Yeah, honor your dead. Lighting a candle, putting a gravestone, putting a cross, a marker. These reminders so that we don't forget. Iconography, those things. I mean, we can talk about, go down the road of monuments, but what is it that we do that we should remember, and what are those markers that help us remember? I think it's pretty important so we don't forget.
For me, it's just talk about them forever. Never stop talking about them.
Yeah. My first time attending a Lutheran service. It was All Saints Day, Sunday.
Ah,
And they were lighting candles for different people in the congregation and asked if I wanted to light one. And I lit one because this was right after COVID. So a lot of people had just passed away. So they had a whole like cross that they were doing. But I lit one for my grandfather, who did not die from COVID, who passed away a little bit further away. And it was such a meaningful event to me, just to light a candle amongst other people who were lighting candles and remembering their lost. And it was really cool. And now this year, when my grandmother, who was married to him, just passed away, we were given a lantern and we were able to set it. It's like an electronic one, and it lights the same time as other people who had a lantern for the same thing every day. And it's just a really cool thing.
nice. Yeah, I think ritual is important, and I mean, it could, like any human, we could take it and twist it and make it something that, whether it's superstition or idolatry, make anything an idol. But I think most of the intent behind it is a ritual to help anchor us into something deeper and to remember something to help us, encourage us along the way in our own journey of faith and life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, I think with that, it is time to wrap this up. And before we give any recommendations or anything, in the spirit of Halloween, Dia de Muerta, whatever you want to call it, I have a very simple question for you both. I'm going to start with you, Pastor Will. The question is only 2 words, believe it or not. Candy corn.
Oh, the controversy of candy corn. Is it good? Is it not? Is it just an anathema to all other candies? Is it your favorite? And if you say it's your favorite, and then you get kicked out of communities and families because you actually like the candy,
you're building up way too much anticipation
and too much. I actually do like candy corn.
Me too.
I will say it's not my favorite.
Me for it.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. It's not like I'm gonna go to the store specifically to buy it, but I like it. It's yeah. I think he sounds convicted. You know what I also like though? It's not candy corn, but it's made out of the same material. There's little pumpkins.
Dude,
there's little candy pumpkins. It's the
whole,
same thing as candy corns, right?
Yeah, I got the whole variety pack. Because I remembered that Tiffany liked candy corn. And it turns out that my wife only likes candy corn. She doesn't like the other ones. She doesn't like the pumpkins. She doesn't like the ones with the chocolate bottoms. I like the chocolate bottom ones. Those are good. Yeah, that's what I feel. I feel like it's the same thing.
It's the same.
It's the same. And because of this, I started like picking and choosing out of the variety pack and trying each of them, like trying to see if I could tell the difference. And then doing like weird combos, like what does it taste like if I do 2 of the chocolate ones and a pumpkin together? And what does it taste like if I do?
I don't know if I've had the chocolate ones, but I'm not. There's definitely people who feel strongly about Halloween who also feel strongly about candy corn. But I don't think it's horrible, and I could eat it. I will confess I'm diabetic, so I got to watch that. But if my blood sugar is getting low, and I need like some sugar to boost it up a little bit, it's probably not the first thing I grab. But if it's the only thing available, I'll gladly eat it, and I don't think it tastes horrible.
Oh, man, well, with that, TJ, you got to tell us, how do you feel about this candy corn situation?
Okay.
All right, fair enough.
Like, yeah, fair enough. I'll eat it, I guess.
Yeah. And with that, guys, I hope you all will. Well, first, let's do recommendations. I need you all to check out Hellboy in Love. No, I've not read it yet. It just came out Wednesday. I was broke until today. As in the day this released. Not the day I'm recording it. I'm still broke, which is why I haven't read it. But when this releases, I will have read it, I will have loved it, and I will have wanted all of you to read it. So, Hellboy in Love, issue number 1, Mike Magnolia.
And as someone who goes to the comic book store every Wednesday to pick up his pull list and stack of comics, sometimes it's taller, sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's more expensive, depending on what's on my pull list and what they try to bait me with. I did buy Hellboy in Love, issue number 1, and it might be the hot pick of the week, but I have to read it first and check it out. And by the time you're listening to this, you can go back to our Instagram page and say, hey, did Will choose for New Comic Book Day, hot pick of the week, Hellboy in Love? Well,
I hope he did.
You can go back and go find our Instagram page and see.
Yeah, I'll find out, but I hope he did. Time travel. Here we are. Guys, and remember, you can always go over to systematicgeekology.org. Not right now. The website's down temporarily. But when it's back up, you can go. You can hit host. Will's name, my name, TJ's name are all there. You can click on it, see all the other things we do, all the other episodes we're on. Check them out. And then we need you to remember that we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of Priest. This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network.